This is a CBC podcast.
This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1. I'm Phelan Johnson. It has been a busy time in the Indigenous literary world lately. It seems wherever you look, there is a hot new title hitting bookstore shelves. From the release of the third and final installment of a beloved series, to Indigenous books making history, or a debut novelist wanting to change how Indigenous identity is seen on the page. Today on the show, we're celebrating Indigenous writers who are taking the literary world by storm. Angeline Bouley's debut novel, Firekeeper's Daughter, follows the journey of Donis, a young mixed-blood Anishinaabe woman navigating life between worlds. In many ways, Donis seems like a normal teenager, going to school, planning for college, and hanging out with her best friend, until tragedy strikes. Firekeeper's Daughter is a YA novel that packs a lot of story, from crime to family legacy and even traditional knowledge and language, and a dash of hockey. It's one of the most anticipated novels of the year. But before the book even hit bookstore shelves, it was getting rave reviews. And it's been picked up by the Higher Ground production company to be adapted into a TV series. That's the Obamas production company. Yes, those Obamas. Angeline is an enrolled member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, and she joins me now from South Michigan. Welcome to the show, Angeline.
Thank you, Phelan. I'm just so happy to be here. Big fan of the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Congratulations on all the success first.
Thank you. Thank you. It is surreal.
You share some similarities with the main character in your novel. How much did you reflect on your own life story while writing this piece?
I think that probably was the origin of it, of this search for identity when you don't feel like you quite belong. And so my dad is Ojibwe and my mom is not Native. And we grew up not on the reservation, but we always visited our grandparents and cousins back in Sault Ste. Marie. So yeah, just growing up, it was that, just kind of feeling not quite the same as my cousins. And so that's where the story really started. And so it was easy to write Donis in the beginning from that perspective.
And while some of the story is pulled from your own life or has threads from your own life, you also reflected on your community of Sault Ste. Marie and Sugar Island and the stories that you've heard from there as well. Why did these feel important to include?
Because that connection to your family and your homeland, I always knew I was Ojibwe. I was always proud of being Ojibwe, and just being on the land it always felt special to me. So I knew I would want that to be a part of the story because so much of your identity involves the land.
The audiobook version of Firekeeper's Daughter is available now as well. Let's hear a bit of that, read by Isabella Leblanc.
The rising sun hides behind a low, dark cloud at the horizon beyond the island. I halt in place, awestruck. Shafts of light fan out from the cloud as if Sugar Island is the source of the sun's rays. A cool breeze ruffles my t-shirt, giving me goosebumps in mid-August. Zizibaka Mini Sing, I whisper in Anishinaabe the name for the island, which my father taught me when I was little. It sounds like a prayer. My father's family, the Firekeeper side, is as much a part of Sugar Island as its spring-fed streams and sugar maple trees.
That was an excerpt of Angeline Bouley's Firekeeper's Daughter, read by Isabella Leblanc. Angeline is here with me talking about her debut novel. And this book has a lot of story in it. There's mystery, there's romance, there's culture, and there's crime. And but to get to that point, it took you a lot of time and took you down some interesting avenues of research.
I think that research just fleshes out the story. It just adds that credibility, that plausibility. And so, yes, I was pretty fortunate. I learned how to make meth and learned how to spot clandestine meth labs. And that training came from State Police Academy. And really it came about because a professor at Lake State University, we were on some committee together and just talking, and I mentioned something about my book, and he was like, "Oh, tell me more." He was really interested in the crime element of it. And then he said, "Hey, I have contacts at the police academy, and I think that I could get you into a class there." And so that was pretty exciting to be the only like non-law enforcement person at the academy. And then too, just friends of friends putting me in contact with a person who's Native, and he is a retired FBI agent. And then we hit it off. He let me ask him anything. And then he put me in touch with a friend of his who's a retired IRS agent. And it just kept, it snowballed into this, one would lead to another. And I would have all of these interesting avenues to check out.
It does seem like, you've encountered a really interesting chain of experts there.
Yes.
So, you have all of these crime elements and all of this knowledge now, but one of the things that I really loved about the book was the casual use of Anishinaabemowin and all of the cultural references that are just sort of naturally threaded through the narrative of the piece. Even the structure of the book was sort of modeled after Ojibwe teachings. Why was it so important for you to include language and culture like this? Because
identity, it ties to the language, the land, and our families. And so I wanted to tell a story that felt purely niche. And to do that, the language just had to be a part of it. And I think some decisions that I made in the process was I wasn't going to do a glossary. I wanted people to be able to see the language and figure it out from the context, and have it just feel very organic to the story. And I just felt that was the best way to tell, a story about an Ojibwe girl is, of course she is raised with cultural teachings and the language. And so she does bring that perspective, and it ends up being like almost her superpower, and her realizing that that's her greatest strength.
And so you were in a previous life, before you became a writer, you were the director of the Office of Indian Education in the U.S. And do you think that working in education informed your writing or what you wanted to write for your first novel?
Yes, definitely. Because previous to working for the U.S. Department of Education, I worked for my tribe. I was my tribe's education director. I wrote grants for after-school programs and summer programs. And I saw that teens were going through the same things that I went through in terms of identity and who defines you as Native and what does that mean. And so I just felt like, and it's pretty interesting that after all the work that I've done in with Indian education, that perhaps my greatest impact will be through story. And there's something about that also feels very Anishinaabe, very, just very much storytelling is how we share what it means to be Indigenous. And so it feels like a very natural thing to do, is to address issues through story.
Yeah, I think story is teaching. Yeah. Firekeeper's Daughter has gotten a lot of attention, and it has now been picked up by the Higher Ground production company for development with Netflix. How does that feel?
So it wasn't until the announcement officially was made that it felt real. The deal has been, in the works for quite some time, but they get to announce it. And so you just have to hold back, wanting to shout to everybody that the Obamas are interested in bringing my book to the screen. And so, yeah, it's just been so exciting that I can finally talk about it. And that makes it feel a lot more real than before.
I wanted to ask you too, the cover art for the book is absolutely stunning. It's a beautiful book. Where did you find the artist?
Well, the art director for Macmillan Children's Publishing Group is Rich Dees, and he really wanted to have an Anishinaabe artist to do the cover. And he really did this collaborative process that when you hear anyone in the publishing industry talk about it, it sounds like it's this revolutionary thing, or this like, wow, this, a game changer. And to me, it seems like, well, of course, why wouldn't the cover be done by an Ojibwe artist? Because just how you view that culture, that worldview, that the beautiful art, it just, to me, it elevates the story, and it includes so many layers. And the artist is Moses Lunham, and he's from Kettle and Stony Point.
Amazing. Yes, I do know him. It looked a lot like his work. I thought it might be him. So I've met him before. He's lovely. He
is just wonderful. And when you look at the cover and you start reading the book, you'll see different things. And by the time you get to the end, there are so many other things in the cover that you will notice. And so I love that, for just as layered as my story is, that his art and that cover conveys the same layers and different meanings and a different way to see things.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. Well, thank you again.
You are very welcome. It's a pleasure to talk with you, and I'm more than happy to talk again whenever you like.
Yes, we'll have to have you back for sure. We'll talk about the TV show, and you can tell us about your dinners with the Obamas.
All right. Well, miigwech. Thank you so much.
Angeline Bouley is an enrolled member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. She joined me today from South Michigan. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169, and Native Voice 1. I'm Phelan Johnson. Checking out some new books by Indigenous authors on the show this week. Joshua Whitehead made Canada Reads history. The Ojinehio writer is the first Indigenous author to win Canada Reads. His book, Johnny Appleseed, was successfully defended by Gunyakahaga actor Gonawaharde Devry Jacobs. In her defense, Jacobs spoke about how she related to the character Johnny as a queer Indigenous woman.
He says, I played straight on the res in order to be Indian, and here I played white in order to be queer. And this resonated really deeply with me. It's connected me to Johnny's experience, but has also acted as a door being here for my family to see that my own queerness is as much a part of me as me being Mohawk. And so, also, I just want to say, if this wins, it'll be the first Indigenous book to ever win, but it's already making history. It's the first Two-Spirit book to be here, and it's the first Two-Spirit author, so I'm just full of gratitude.
Joshua Whitehead is from Peguis First Nation, and he joins me now from Calgary. Joshua, congratulations and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Phelan. Just starting with the waterworks right off the bat.
I gotta say, it does. It gets me too. What is it like for you to hear that again?
So I was forced to watch Canada Reads 3 different times with 3 separate bubbles, socially isolated or distanced. So every time it gets me. It's just like that. I think I was talking to Devry afterwards, and I was like, I think I teach a lot with using Canada Reads, using sound clips. One of my favorites is Julie Black telling a certain person to take it to the altar. So I was like, I think the sound clip is going to resonate with so many people and being used across Turtle Island as a teaching tool, but also as just like a home calling for other queer Two-Spirit Indigenous folks. And I remember when I saw that live, and I was in the backstage of CBC Canada Reads for this, and I was like, it's going to begin. It's like, here comes the bawling. Because I thought, the story, I love Johnny Appleseed. Devry loves Johnny Appleseed. I just cherished that book so much because I wrote it knowing I needed it. But I think Devery and I went in knowing that like Johnny Appleseed is so much more than just a book, that it is almost like it's community and it's medicine and it's a gatebreaker and a rock and a whole lot of medicine, as Johnny would say, because it's not just a book, it's all of these communities that we house within the book. And when Devery said that, and I love that so much, because I was like, this is when I knew, like, this book is great, but so much more about it. It's like the power of words and how they can like sing you back to your bones. And that revelation that Devery shared, and I just hope, like, I was like, that's what you experienced, that's what I experienced. Now, like, let's multiply that by thousands for all those Indigenous, queer, Indigenous, or Two-Spirit folks across Turtle Island. So it's the highest honor to have shared that with her and to have both of us embodied that. And I hope folks see that too.
You two really are sort of bonded for life over this experience, I think.
We are. We would call each other every night. But also, like, the great prize that I took away from it was befriending Devery and us being, like, braided together as kin, I would say, for life now. So happy to have that friend in my life.
And Johnny Appleseed came out 3 years ago. Why do you think your book is resonating with people now?
I mean, yeah, it did come out a handful of years ago, and I was surprised to see it on Canada Reads because of that fact. But I think during COVID and like social isolation and lockdown, specifically for queer, trans, or non-binary Indigenous youth or Two-Spirit folks, I can only imagine like the magnitude of difficulty it must be to like be in isolation, specifically in spaces that might be harming or damaging, or not allowing one to kind of quote unquote come out, but also to come in. And I think we kind of saw the necessity for it and the lacking of Indigenous and queer Indigenous and Two-Spirit Indigenous representation on a stage of Canada Reads. So it was high time, I think. And Lucy Mann from CBC notified me and Devery a couple of days ago that Johnny Appleseed, when it won, was actually the national actual folktale Johnny Appleseed Day. So I think all the stars were aligned, and it was needed.
That's some ancestors on your side, I think.
I think so, yeah. All the glitter, all the Two-Spirit ancestors were walking with us that day.
And Canada Reads can be a challenging space for authors. Were you hesitant to have your book debated on such a public stage?
I will say I was scared going in because Johnny holds no bars. Very much tells you the truth in either its most pain valences or its most powerful valences. And also, as the book has been described, it's full of a lot of fluids. And I didn't know how that was going to be taken on the stage of Canada Reads. I always joke that my kink is to like have 2 glasses of wine and read my Goodreads reviews, wherein like a lot of like salty, like het cis white man and other folks are being like, this book is trash, it's smut. So I was, very nervous for that, about the backlash that it might have received. But there was some, quite a bit actually, specifically on the Facebook comments on CBC. But also, I just kind of turned off my notifications. I just avoided those and just like let myself be showered by community and love, because that's what it's for. And those others that want to critique it because of their own biases or phobias around any of these concepts or identities, that's not on me. That's their work to do.
And winning Canada Reads, it means a lot for people who are ordering Johnny Appleseed or, putting it on hold in their local library. For the people who are still waiting to get their hands on copies, can you tell us a bit about who Johnny is?
Johnny is a self-ordained Indian glitter princess. He's high femme, very campy at times, but very strategic. He's an online sex worker, and I would say most Indigenous peoples will know, like during the month of October, when those Party City costumes come out, Johnny is very strategic in fetishizing himself for the sake of being a fetish, but is in control of that and capitalizes off the desires of like queer white men, primarily. But the story is about Johnny returning home to his reservation. So he's in Winnipeg, Manitoba, going back to Peguis First Nation, which is also my res, for the wake of a stepfather. And it takes place over 7 days if we're going to put it into a plot structure. But what really happens, and I really kind of think of Johnny Appleseed now, instead of a novel, more like a photo album, because I wanted it to write cyclically, like when Indigenous folks, we sit around the table, we got the bannock, we got the tea, we got the Pepsi, and someone wants to tell a story, but we're going to tell you 17 other stories around that one to get so you fully understand the one that we're trying to tell. And I wanted it to sound like, and I tried to write it like we were sitting at a table and Johnny was telling you all his stories while flipping through a photo album. So the story, yeah, trying to return home to the res for the wake, but it's not really about that. It's mostly kind of an exploration of Johnny's life and the Indigenous women and the Two-Spirit folks that really kind of celebrate and hold him.
And several Indigenous authors have made it to the Canada Reads stage over the years. Catherine Vermette, Sheila Cloutier, Jessie Thistle, Sherry Demeline. What does it mean to you to be the first Indigenous author to win? This is such a series of firsts for you, I know, but this is such a huge moment.
Yeah, all of those authors that you named, and even Auntie Eden Robinson. I also I don't write in a vacuum. So even though my name says Joshua Whitehead as the author in here, I'm not the sole author, because these are like a whirlwind or a collective song of stories and characters and people I know and ancestral legacies. And I would say winning this as on the stage of Canada Reads as the first, I share that prize with everyone, because it did take a lot of legacy work and groundwork and wall breaking of so many other Indigenous storytellers to even be in that spot. So I'm very humbled, and I share it with everyone. And I also recognize the labor and love that all of those authors you named put forward for all of us to have this moment on the stage.
Since your win, has anything changed for you? Are people sending you pics of them, holding the books, or sending you pics of the book with the Canada Reads sticker on it? Anything like that?
I mean, I've definitely got a lot busier. I will say that.
That makes sense.
As I've told Debbie, in bringing me to the stage and championing it so well and winning the thing, I have told her, you have changed my life, irrevocably, from just a small town poet in Winnipeg who was basically peddling poems for pennies, now to being the winner of Canada Reads and Johnny Appleseed going to its 9th printing and being sold out right now on Indigo and across local indie bookstores, which I always say support first and foremost. It's a whirlwind, but it's all warm winds. And just also the outpouring on social media. I did a CBC interview right after I won. It was 20 minutes, and I came back to check my phone, and it told me I had 270 some missed notifications. That was 20 minutes. So all the beautiful tags and just the stories people are sharing on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, especially of Indigenous or even BIPOC and queer folks, of what this story means to them, how it resonated with them, how it changed them, or even challenged them. That too is the grand prize of, again, showing me the power of words and the power of stories.
And this book, it did come out a few years ago. So do you have anything in the works now? What are you working on?
So in the meantime, since Johnny, I did release an anthology entitled Love After the End, an anthology of Two-Spirit and indigiqueer speculative fiction, which really talks about utopias for us and with us. But I think it came out during COVID, and I think it's kind of weird to say, but I'm very happy it did, because I thought those stories were needed. I'm currently finishing a book titled Making Love with the Land, which is coming out in 2022 spring, hopefully with Canop Canada, that is about mental health, indigeneity, and queerness, and in indigeneity, primarily queerness. Of me just kind of sharing my own stories or stories that I've interviewed with or been told, because I think it's so necessary, specifically for queer Two-Spirit youth, with the rampant youth suicides we have across Turtle Island, and maybe our reluctance to talk about our mental health. So I said, I've seen this before. I've shared stories or secret conversations with other, Indigenous folks. And I thought the best way that I could do it was to put myself on that stage. So it's nonfiction. I can't hide behind a character this time. So it's very vulnerable, but I'm very excited for it to be finished. And then I also have a 2-book deal with Canop. So I'll be returning to the novel once the manuscript's finished. And I won't give any spoilers, but I will just say we might see a character that I've written return.
Oh, that is very tantalizing. That's a cliffhanger to end on. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. I know you were very busy. We will let you get back to answering your hundreds of notifications and maybe to collect some flowers that have been left at your door while you've been away.
Well, Stoneton, thank you so much for having me, my friends.
That was Joshua Whitehead, author of Johnny Appleseed, this year's winner of Canada Reads. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169, and Native Voice 1. I'm Phelan Johnson. Still ahead, Eden Robinson will join me to talk about wrapping up her Trickster trilogy and why it's like living through a breakup.
It's weird to wake up and not write and not be in that world. Like it's been so many years of my life. This is like that awkward time when you've both agreed not to see each other anymore, but you live in the same apartment. So, you're being really polite with each other, but you're both still hurt. Everything's a little raw, and you're trying to decide who gets the toaster.
That's in just a few minutes. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169, and Native Voice 1. I'm Phelan Johnson. Checking out some new books by Indigenous authors on the show this week. You may have come across my next guest's work in the graphic novel section of your local bookstore. Tasha Spillett Sumner's graphic novels follow the journeys of Indigenous youth who struggle with urban life while staying connected to their culture and community. Those books were aimed at youth and young adults, but her latest book is for the little ones. I Sang You Down from the Stars is a picture book about preparing for a baby and the gifts of parenthood. The book was illustrated by Tlingit artist Michaela Goad, who won this year's Caldecott Medal. The prestigious award is given out to one children's book illustrator every year. Tasha is Afro-Indigenous, and she joins me now from Winnipeg. Tasha, congrats on the book and welcome to the show.
Great, thank you for having me.
So, can you tell us what was the inspiration for this book?
I wrote this book at the time when I was expecting our first child, Isabella. And so as my belly grew, this story grew along with it. And I was so excited to be able to share this book, especially with, as we know, other parents who have become parents during the pandemic. I feel like it's a way for me to reach out to them and share this very special experience, but an experience that we are now having in a way that we never imagined we would have.
And why did you want to write a book for children?
Well, of course, having a child of my own, I feel like it's so important that our little ones be able to reach for books that they can see themselves and their families within. And so when I grew up, my mom always made sure that we had lots of books with Black and brown children in it. And I wanted to do the same for our daughter, to make sure that when we're reading books with her, that she see little ones like her on the page. And I think that that's so important, and that every child has the right to experience.
Tasha, I was wondering if you would read some of the book to us.
I would love to. I loved you before I met you. Before I held you in my arms, I sang you down from the stars. As I searched for your eyes in the sky, I saw a shooting star. I followed it to a fluffy eagle plume. I held on to it, the first gift in a bundle that will be yours. Summer was fading into fall on the day I found that you had chosen to make my body your first home. Together, we went to gather cedar and sage, medicines that will keep our spirits strong through the winter. When you are old enough, I will teach you how to use them. Into your bundle they go.
That was Tasha Spillett Sumner reading from her new book, I Sang You Down from the Stars. So your book features some traditional items like an eagle feather, cedar, and sage. Why was it important for you to include these items in this story?
So we live our lives in accordance to our traditional understandings, and ceremony is a big part of how we live our lives. And so for me, as an Afro-Indigenous person, I strongly believe that we are the experts in our own experiences, and that our stories are ours to tell, and that we should be telling them. And so when I wanted to write a children's book, it was important to me to weave in these aspects of myself that are linked to my own identity. And I think that, it's important for Indigenous children and non-Indigenous children to see that these are living cultures, these are living understandings, and we practice them each and every day in any space that we're in. And we're not frozen in time, we're not something of the past, but we're here and all around in our communities and in other people's communities. And our teachings are still what gives us strength and allows us to live our lives in a good way.
I'm curious about the title of your book. It's so evocative. Can you tell me where the title came from and what it means to you?
So in my understanding for my nation, the Cree Nation, our creation stories placed us as originating in the star world. And we believe that our people come from the stars. And so when I thought of, the ceremony that we asked for our child to come in, it made me think of, calling up to the heavens, calling up to the universe to ask for this child to come down from the stars. And so that's where the title came from. Also, for your listeners, my husband is singer-songwriter Leonard Sumner, and he is well known for using his voice in the beautiful ways that he does. And so singing is a huge part of our family and how we give comfort to our little girl, but also how we share, the awarenesses that are important to our people.
The illustrations for your book are absolutely stunning. For this book, you worked with Tlingit illustrator Michaela Goad, and she won the Caldecott Medal for Children's Book Illustrations this year. What was your approach like when working with her?
Michaela is a dream. Like every time I go on her Instagram page, I'm like always just so stunned by her, the beauty that she's able to create. And if you look at the pages of this book, I think that it really gives you a glimpse into the magical brain that she has. Like each page is so gorgeous, and I just feel so honored and humbled to be able to work with her. And also the attention to detail that she took in making this artwork is so just like sits in my heart so deeply. So while I was pregnant, she kind of followed my Instagram and she picked up very personal things from our life, like if you see the characters represented in the illustrations, you'll see the faces of the people that I hold most dear. And I just that's so meaningful to me. And it's as a personal touch that she didn't have to do, but, she felt called to do. And I feel like her and I working together, I feel so lucky and fortunate to have worked with her. And I really hope to get the chance to work with her in the future.
What do you hope readers take away from this book?
I hope that the book finds people who are, seeking for connection. I became a parent, like I said, in the pandemic, and I feel like that's such a particular experience that a lot needs to be paused and reflected upon because, we're quite literally raising children in isolation, and we were never meant to parent in isolation, especially as people who come from quite expansive kinship systems. It's been very difficult. And so although this wasn't the particular intention at the time I wrote the book, now I really hope it finds the hands and hearts of people who are, desperately seeking communities of care and really grieving the ways in which we imagined our children would be celebrated and welcomed by our communities. And so I hope that, in this sacred and tender time that this book find families who are wanting and yearning for that community to raise their children within.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with us today, Tasha. The book is absolutely beautiful in so many ways, and congratulations.
Thanks so much.
Tasha Spillett Sumner is Afro-Indigenous, and she joined me from Winnipeg. Her new picture book, illustrated by Michaela Goad, is called I Sang You Down from the Stars. It will be out in April.
He couldn't quite catch his breath. He unplugged the tub, dried himself off, and pulled on his borrowed clothes. His thoughts were not things he wanted to spend time with. His memories of the last few days were not safe. His face in the mirror hid all the insanity behind an ordinary mug, aside from the ring of bruises around his neck where Georgina had last throttled him, calling him a brainless chicken. He needed to fix that. Make it less obvious, at least. Heal, he told himself. But that made his heart speed up and his palms clammy. He was still Jared. He was human. He didn't want to be some freak like his biological father, although his hospital bathroom organ roundup screamed of the weirdness that could only be caused by a trickster.
That is a clip from the audiobook Return of the Trickster, read by Gonadio Horn. Return of the Trickster is the third and final book in Eden Robinson's wildly popular Trickster trilogy. This final book features everything: a pot-smoking Sasquatch, a well-mannered flying head, and of course, a trickster. The books have garnered nominations, awards, and much critical acclaim with a large fan base. The Trickster books have been a big part of author Eden Robinson's life for years now, and with the conclusion of the series, we wanted to catch up with the Haisla Heiltsuk author to reflect on the journey of the series. She joins me now from Kitimat Village in BC. Welcome to the show, Eden.
Thank you.
So you've just released the final book in your Trickster series. Can you take us back to the roots of this now wildly popular series? How did Trickster start?
Well, Trickster started with a short story that I was going to write to take a break from the novel that I was working on at that point. I just wanted something that I could finish and get a sense of accomplishment. So I started writing this Trickster story. And my dad had been telling my niece and nephew a Trickster story, and they didn't grow up in the village, so they didn't really find it funny the way I had found Trickster stories funny when I was growing up, and I thought that was really sad. So I wanted to contextualize the Trickster that I know in a current setting. And yeah, that got away from me. 50 pages in, I was like, oh, okay, I think it might be a novella. And then I hit page 400 and it was like, it might be a novel. I pitched it to my agent, and she pitched it around to publishing houses, and we signed a contract, and I finished off the first draft.
Well, I do think that your books really, they have brought things like tricksters and Sasquatches and shapeshifters, more to not just an Indigenous audience, but more of a Canadian mainstream audience as well. And do you feel trepidation, or, how do you feel it is? I know that in my community, there's a saying, you don't talk about that. We don't talk about that. And so when I was reading the series, it was something that I thought about. Do you feel that trepidation when you speak or write about these things?
My entire writing process has been built slowly. Like in the very beginning of my career, I didn't want to deal with, a real community. And that did not work. The power of the story is in its specificity. The power comes from the real place and the real people. Monkey Beach was a steep learning curve. A, I didn't know how to write a novel. And B, the Haisla experience with people writing about them had been so awful that no one wanted to talk to me. It became very clear that there's a Haisla copyright, and it's tied up with the potlatch. So there are stories that are owned by individuals, clans, or by the community, and to use them, I would have to throw a potlatch. I have a good name, but it's not big enough for me to throw my own potlatch. So I would have to ask the chief or the high ladies of the clan to use that story, and I'd have to ask them if I could attach my business to their potlatch. And potlatches run from about $10,000 to $40,000. So Haisla copyright is too expensive for me. So I tend to stay with the public domain stories. So, so I would talk things out with my family, with a couple of cousins in particular. And it just required a lot of consultation. That's my approach to my process. Not everybody comes from the same kind of culture. So their protocol is going to be different. And it's really hard for me to advise other Indigenous authors if I don't know the protocol. Like some people don't have like any strictures around the traditional stories. And that must be nice. If you don't have to deal with like the delicate negotiations and the maneuverings and the careful conversations, then that means you get to focus on craft a bit more.
Eden, I know you have a copy there, and you're going to read a bit for us.
I would love to.
This is Eden Robinson, and a bit from the final book in her Trickster series, Return of the Trickster.
Chapter 1, Sloppy Dead. The IV dripped cold into Jared Martin's arm, a remarkably grounding sensation. Saline, He remembered the nurse telling him he was dehydrated and that he kept throwing up the water they gave him. Bile scorched the back of his throat. An unseen ambulance warbled, growing louder. The lights were achingly bright. The hospital mattress was firm against his back, and the pale curtains surrounding him were shut. Through these fabric walls, he could hear other patients in the Kitimat General Hospital emergency ward murmuring with their families, friends, lovers. A scream cut through the quiet as the electric doors swooshed open somewhere near, bringing the smell of rain, then closed. Voices shouted information and instructions at each other as a lone male voice howled, guttural. He shivered. Nausea hit again. Jared's stomach cramped. The nurse had given him a little cardboard container for his vomit, but it was full and pungent, reeking on the medical table. Jared slid off the bed. The floor was cold against his bare feet. He yanked off the clear tape that held the IV in place and carefully pulled out the needle. The other bed curtains were shut, but through the gaps he could see patients listening intently as another male voice joined the first. He made it out to the corridor where he watched two men fight free of the paramedics and a lone police officer to grapple with each other. A security guard ran past Jared as the men threw punches that landed with earnest thuds. Jared covered his mouth as he started to heave. He pushed open the heavy bathroom door and threw up into the toilet. Blood, bright red against the white enamel, diffused in tendrils in the water. Copper in his mouth. The muscles in his throat clenched and released until he threw up again, this time a stew of blood and chunks. His stomach burned, a hot pain like accidentally swallowing a live coal. The searing intensified until it was as if he'd swallowed the whole barbecue pit. Oh God, Jared thought, I'm dying.
That's Eden Robinson reading from her new book, Return of the Trickster. It's the third and final book in her Trickster trilogy. So Eden, Trickster, this series has been a big part of your life for many years now, and I've heard you describe leaving these characters behind as a mutual breakup. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
I know when a novel is done, when I wake up in the morning and it's not the first thing that I think about, and it's not the last thing I think about when I go to sleep. So, you know, it's weird to wake up and not write and not be in that world. Like it's been so many years of my life. This is like that awkward time when you've both agreed not to see each other anymore, but you live in the same apartment. So, you know, you're being really polite with each other. But you're both still hurt. Everything's a little raw, and you're trying to decide who gets the toaster. That's the stage I'm at with the books.
So you have said before that writing is medicine. And can you tell me what you mean by that?
There are so many things in writing that help me deal with the world. Like the Trickster series got me through like some of the darkest times of my life, some of the hardest moments, and I could deal with them through my fictional world. I don't know how non-writers deal with the world. It brings a lot of clarity to my life. It brings a lot of joy. It can be frustrating. It can be, it can be all manner of things. But when you're on a roll and the writing is coming effortlessly and you're, to be very 90s, in the zone, there is no bigger rush. Like it's a bigger high than anything. And knowing that my life can be filled with that much joy, even when I'm going through like all the life experiences that you go through in midlife, it's one of the great pleasures in my life. And I'm very grateful for it.
Well, congratulations on all of the accomplishments and this massive feat. And thank you for taking the time to chat with us today, Eden.
Thank you for having me.
Eden Robinson joined us from Kitimat Village in BC. The third and final book in her Trickster series, The Return of the Trickster, is out now. That's it for this week's episode of Unreserved. If you want to get in touch with us, email unreserved@cbc.ca or find us on Facebook or Twitter. This episode was produced by Kyle Musica, Zoe Tennant, Sean Vanderklis, and Anna Lazowski. And I would like to take a moment to acknowledge departing producer Stephanie Cram, who has taken a new position as a reporter with CBC Manitoba. Our loss is CBC Manitoba's gain. We'll miss you, Steph, but we wish you all the best. I'm Phelan Johnson. Now a goa for listening.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.